As Marcus Allen Robinson pulled into the parking lot outside the Greenville, South Carolina municipal courtroom, the clock showed 8:42 a.m. Marcus Allen let out a heavy breath as the long shadows of the early sun danced across the tarmac. He despised tardiness. His career as a federal prosecutor was built on the tenets of preparation and self-control, but now he felt like life was working against him. He didn't intend for this morning to be challenging. Disputing a mistake in the property tax adjustment for the house his grandmother bequeathed him was the dull and tedious process that lay ahead. Marcus Allen had devoted weeks to compiling evidence showing the city's tax increase was ill-advised. He saw the home as more than just a piece of property. It had been his steadfast home since he was a little boy, the spot where he had been taught both beneficial and bad habits by his grandma. Despite the challenges of his morning, Marcus Allen exuded confidence in his dark navy suit and clean white shirt. He was delayed because he received an urgent phone call regarding an ongoing case of human trafficking. Because of a last-minute motion submitted by the defense side, Marcus Allen was unable to disregard it. He knew he was on the brink of losing, so he hurried to court after reviewing the motion and giving his staff input. His phone beeped as he walked up to the courthouse steps. Upon initial observation, it seemed as though his assistant from the U.S. Attorney's Office had left him a message. The Greenville judge is known for being very strict with those who show up late for court. Watch out. With a sigh, Marcus Allen placed his phone in his briefcase. His mind was peaceful. He had proof and facts at his disposal, which were his weapons. However, the statement left an impression. As he entered the courthouse's chilly interior, he shrugged it off. In contrast to Marcus Allen's usual routine in federal court, the municipal court was quite different. The walls had a muted beige color, while the benches bore the marks of many years of usage. Coffee and old paper had a subtle aroma in the air. The area was bustling with activity despite its weathered look. People walked in and out, anxiously clutching paperwork related to parking fines, small claims, and other such issues. Marcus Allen looked down at his wristwatch. At 8:50 in the morning, just enough time to locate the right courtroom, 10 minutes to spare. Following the instructions, he made his way down a tiny hallway, listening to people whisper. Section 204-4-2. The door bore the carved brass name of Judge Walter Jenkins Whitman. After adjusting his tie, Marcus Allen entered. More and more people were entering the courtroom. Sitting down in the back, Marcus Allen flipped open his folder and began reviewing his evidence. As he skimmed his papers, his attention was drawn to the judge's entrance. Judge Walter Jenkins Whitman, a towering figure with a silver beard and intense blue eyes, commands attention even when he remained silent. The way he surveyed the room, his penetrating stare oblivious to everything, belied his image as an uncompromising figure. The bailiff commanded everyone to stand up. Everyone in the room rose to their feet. With a straight back, Marcus Allen also got in on the action. Marcus Allen noted the sudden hush that fell over the courtroom as the judge took his seat. Judge Whitman's tone was cold and dispassionate as he mechanically proceeded to call cases one by one. Marcus Allen closely monitored all proceedings. Silently making his way into the room was a middle-aged man dressed in a suit. He was only a few minutes late. A few moments after that, a young woman dressed casually slipped in and sat down. The judge didn't even look at any of them. Keeping his attention on his own case, Marcus Allen mentally made a note. Marcus Allen finally heard his name called at 9:15 a.m. He collected his packet and walked calmly to the platform, as if nothing had happened during the brief wait. Judge Whitman became more stern as he drew near. The room had a subtle tension Marcus Allen had not noticed in the other cases. "Mr. Robinson, you are running behind schedule," the judge admonished in an ear-piercing tone. "Is your time more important than the court's?" As a sign of recognition, Marcus Allen slightly lifted his hand, palms facing forth. "I'm sorry for the delay, Your Honor. As a matter of paramount importance, I was addressing the federal government." The judge interrupted him. Apologies do not absolve tardiness. Both respect and order are essential in this court. Please reassess your priorities if you find it difficult to understand. It seems as if dozens of people were staring at Marcus Allen. He remained calm, carefully considering what to say next. Before you, Honorable, the significance of being punctual is something I get. Allow me to make my case for the property tax adjustment, if that's okay with you. Dismissively, Judge Whitman waved his hand. We will address that. Let us begin with the issue of contempt. Promptness is crucial to the success of these trials. The sum of $750 is now due from you. The sound of the words reverberated across the atmosphere. Even though Marcus Allen's jaw clenched a little, he maintained an expressionless face. The room was filled with whispers as he stood there, with a controlled and composed tone. Your Honor, Marcus Allen started. Let me clarify. With a raised gavel, the judge put an end to his oratory. Yeah, you totally can't. Think of this as a lesson in deference to authority. Bracing himself, Marcus Allen's thoughts raced. Being late wasn't the only issue. There was an underlying theme at play, one that most in the audience had probably seen before. He took a quick look about at the other tardinesses, but nobody had been in trouble. Marcus Allen was determined to address the glaring disparity. Marcus Allen went back to his seat and opened his folder, but this time he wasn't looking at the property tax paperwork. With a rapid stroke of the pen, he started making notes. Meanwhile, the judge's voice remained steady as he moved on to the next case. One thing was certain for Marcus Allen. It was everything but a typical morning. Sitting in the last row, Marcus Allen's thoughts were consumed with a flurry of computations and observations. The proceedings continued as usual in the courtroom, but Marcus Allen was haunted by the stark contrast he had just seen. He recalled the exact moment Judge Whitman levied the $750 fine, drawing a comparison to the complete lack of concern displayed towards those who had arrived late. Sitting at the front, undisturbed by rebuke, was the young woman who had sneaked in earlier. After the judge started speaking, a man in a gray blazer obviously went in to plead his case. However, Marcus Allen was the sole target of the gavel's fury. Nothing happened in a vacuum. Just like the papers in his briefcase, Marcus Allen could see the pattern. He carefully evaluated the case, relying on his instincts as a lawyer. This hefty punishment for being late to municipal court was harsh, bordering on punitive. He took notice of the looks on people's faces, which conveyed a combination of shock, unease, and interest. No one dared to say it, but Marcus Allen could sense that everyone in the room was thinking the same thing. Judge Whitman declared the next case. Marcus Allen's name resounded around the room once more. Returning to the podium, he stood up, his gait composed and methodical. The judge maintained the same intense stare, as if daring him to mess up. In regards to the incorrect property tax adjustment, I have the necessary paperwork, Your Honor, as Marcus Allen started to explain. These modifications are at odds with the property's assessed values, which have been maintained by my family for many years. As he set the folder on the platform, he opened it to find a collection of images and documents that were well organized. He pointed to a certain page. This is the first tax evaluation, which was the same for all 5 years. But the current adjustment shows a 30% rise with no explanation or warning. A look of boredom spread across Judge Whitman's face as he reclined in his chair. Mr. Robinson, I will study it when the time comes. Nevertheless, we will not ignore the fact that you were late this morning. Is it your sincere belief that the pressing nature of your federal duties warrants your contempt for this court? Marcus Allen's poise remained unchanged. No offense intended, Your Honor. I apologize for the delay. I was occupied with a federal case concerning human trafficking, which I think we can all agree needs our full attention right now. There was a little narrowing of the judge's eyes, but his tone remained unwavering. No amount of good intentions can justify disobeying the rules. Legal processes are in place for a purpose. Something other than the words themselves moved Marcus Allen. It was the message that his answer wasn't good enough, conveyed in an unspoken tone of contempt. No one in this room cared about his integrity, professional achievements, or system respect. Marcus Allen allowed himself to be calm for a time by taking a deep breath. The significance of regulations is clear to me, Your Honor. My question is this: are all the participants in this courtroom subject to the same regulations? The room was suddenly filled with an uneasy feeling. A deeper flush spread across the judge's face as he tensed up. Mr. Robinson, are you challenging the credibility of this court? I'm requesting clarity, Marcus Allen responded, maintaining a consistent tone. Maintaining equity is critical, not only for my own sake, but for the sake of everyone here. The judge's gavel fell with a harsh sound. Claims made against this court will not be tolerated. We uphold your penalty. Marcus Allen cocked his head ever so slightly, his face betraying him. Your Honor, I am grateful. With the judges and jurors staring at him, he sank back into his seat. The timid awe of some and the anxious fear of others were palpable to him. Although Marcus Allen has experienced prejudice masquerading as authority before, this particular instance had an air of mystery about it. It was as if the whole room could feel the anticipation building for his next move. Marcus Allen surreptitiously typed notes on his phone. He still hadn't finished, far from it. In that same moment, he quietly made a decision. This is only the beginning. Despite going about its business as usual, the courtroom dynamic had changed due to Marcus Allen's appearance. Numerous others also witnessed it. 2 rows up, an elderly black guy shifted ever so slightly, casting a quick, knowing look toward Marcus Allen. On occasion, the court clerk paused, her apparent unease showing through as her fingers sped across the keyboard. After the lesson was over, Marcus Allen stayed for a while. He saw that as individuals poured out, they were carrying the unsaid burden of what had happened. Seated in the corner, a young law student scribbled quickly in her notebook, her look a mix of wonder and resolve. Having formed a strategy in his mind, Marcus Allen departed from the courtroom with his briefcase. A property tax adjustment, or penalties, had lost their relevance. Something far bigger was at stake, and he couldn't turn a blind eye. Even in the cool air outside, Marcus Allen could feel the stress that remained as he left the courthouse. Despite the constant hum of routine business in the courtroom, Marcus Allen had already made his decision. On the steps, he staggered for a while, his eyes fixed on his phone. His thumb lingered over the number for his assistant U.S. attorney at the office. "Excuse me," he whispered to himself. "I am not ready just yet." He took a step back to go over his notes once again. From everything he had seen and heard in Judge Whitman's courtroom, a distinct image emerged. This discrepancy was systemic, not accidental. Legal intuition informed Marcus Allen he had a case that would grow into something more than property taxes or his own treatment. Marcus Allen retrieved his credentials and badge from his briefcase upon returning to his vehicle. As light filtered through his windshield, the federal prosecutor's golden insignia gleamed. He chose this as the initial step. By the time he returned to the courtroom, he had already decided most of the morning's cases. There were fewer people in the room, but a handful of them were still there, either reading papers or waiting their turn. With a composed but obviously exhausted expression, Judge Whitman flipped over some papers. Marcus Allen strided confidently toward the bench, his badge and identification in his possession. The court clerk glanced up at him, her fingers stopping mid-type as he walked up to the platform. Judge Whitman looked up, his annoyance quickly resurfacing. "The session in court has ended, Mr. Robinson." The judge curtly stated that an appointment would be necessary if you had any more business. With an air of subtle authority, Marcus Allen started speaking to Your Honor. "I think it's necessary to announce myself officially." He made sure his badge was visible to everyone in the room by gently raising it. "Hello, my name is Marcus Allen Robinson, and I'm here today as an assistant U.S. attorney for the North Carolina District. For almost 10 years, I worked as an attorney for the United States Department of Justice, specializing in civil rights abuses, corruption, and human trafficking cases. With a sudden stop, the judge's hands remained still over the documents in his possession. As Marcus Allen's comments hit home, his face lost its color. As a group, the remaining onlookers sat transfixed, their faces betraying a mixture of interest and expectation. An essential federal matter necessitated my quick attention, which is why I was late this morning, Marcus Allen said in a strong but kind tone. Even while I realized the significance of following the rules of the court, I couldn't help but note the difference in the way cases were handled today. The judge's lips narrowed. If you believe there was a problem with the procedure, Mr. Robinson, you are free to submit a formal complaint. After this morning's occurrences, I've started recording them in my notebook, Marcus Allen said, gesturing toward it. Both my personal treatment and the varying reactions to other latecomers, especially along racial lines, were significant. As a court official, I must report any instances of prejudice or bias I encounter. Judge Whitman seemed visibly unsettled as he reclined in his chair. Mr. Robinson, are you asserting that this court has engaged in misconduct? Your Honor, I am testifying based on my observations. Calmly, Marcus Allen spoke. My whole career as a federal prosecutor has been devoted to the principle of equal justice under the law, irrespective of the party in question. Some very grave worries have been prompted by what I saw today. The room was filled with an eerie stillness. With her hands trembling uncomfortably over the keyboard, the court clerk nervously looked between Marcus Allen and the judge. In the far corner, a young law student was frantically taking notes, her expression one of pure wonder. To get his composure back, the judge cleared his throat. This court is quite concerned about these kinds of cases. Please follow the proper procedures to raise any concerns you may have regarding a possible error in judgment. On the podium, Marcus Allen set his identity badge. I'll try, Your Honor, but now is a good time to think about how to make all courts fair and equitable. As he shifted uneasily in his chair, Judge Whitman's fists clenched around its arms. He had presided over this tribunal for decades. Such an outright challenge to his authority was unusual. His self-assurance appeared to waver for the very first time. After becoming more silent, the court finally gave the go-ahead to Mr. Robinson. Before turning to depart, Marcus Allen gathered his credentials and made one more comment. Your Honor, I am grateful. I'll ensure the appropriate handling of this situation. Marcus Allen felt the weight of each spectator's gaze on him as he exited the courtroom for the second time that morning. He felt the gravity of the situation. Instead of just defending himself, he challenged a system that was blind to its flaws. Marcus Allen went outside, took out his phone, and started to type a long email to his boss. He detailed every contact, observation, and inequality he had seen. He knew this was only the start. As he pushed send, the processing speed of the email Marcus Allen sent that afternoon surprised him. The next morning, he received a call from the United States Attorney's Office. His boss, the no-nonsense long-serving attorney Angela Davis Harper, talked with an air of mystery and urgency. According to her, Marcus Allen, she had reviewed the report. If my understanding is correct, this is not an isolated incident. This may point to a bias in the system. Marcus Allen said that he thought it did. It was not subtle what transpired yesterday. I'm sure I'm not alone in having witnessed this trend, and it fits in with what I've seen previously. A harsh exhalation escaped Angela Davis. The Judicial Review Commission is an organization I will contact. Caution and thoroughness are required in dealing with this. While you wait, compile all the paperwork you can. We must be prepared in case something is made public. Although the call came to a close, Marcus Allen's task was only just starting. After the municipal court hearing, he laboriously pieced together all the details. Investigating Judge Whitman's fines and punishments, he found discrepancies in the public records. The emergence of patterns started. Black defendants frequently paid heftier fines for relatively small offenses, whereas white defendants frequently got warnings or fewer punishments. Marcus Allen made contact with people in the community and at work, including lawyers who had been before Judge Whitman. It was a deluge of responses. The news of unequal treatment began to trickle in. While some offered with audacious audacity, others murmured with assurance. A young black lady described how a white guy with several infractions received a little cost compared to the hefty punishment that a young black woman received for a parking ticket. A second witness stated that the court rarely afforded black defendants the opportunity to fully present their arguments before abruptly dismissing them. The Judicial Review Commission formally inquired within days. Investigators raided the courtroom in search of years' worth of case files and interrogated employees. An important character was Mrs. Jefferson, the court clerk. A little notepad that she had stashed away in her desk drawer for years was nervously handed over by her. She came clean and said that she had been taking notes like this. "I made sure to jot down each time things didn't feel right. Until now, I've been reluctant to voice my concerns, but I can no longer ignore them." The notes painted a damning picture. "We painstakingly documented every incident of unfair treatment, including the date, names, and details." Jamal Johnson Wilson, the courtroom bailiff for many years, was also interviewed by investigators. The confidence in his remarks was subtle but unmistakable. As for Wilson, he has been here for 15 years. Depending on who they are, the court treats people differently, as I've witnessed firsthand. Even though I knew it was wrong, I never believed I could do something about it. At the same time, words started to go out around the neighborhood. A witness, a young law student, documented the entire interaction in a social media post after seeing it happen in court. Rapidly gaining momentum, it sparked indignation and an avalanche of parallel accounts within hours. Not long after that, it made news. Is the Greenville courtroom biased? A federal prosecutor questions the actions of a judge. Marcus Allen became the focal point of a developing storm as news outlets began to cover the event. He opted to stay absorbed in the inquiry despite the constant barrage of calls from media. Judge Whitman started to feel the effects of the increasing pressure. There were whispers that several judicial monitoring groups had requested his presence at secret sessions. In public, he denied any guilt, but in private, he was starting to understand the gravity of the situation. The first week came to a close when Angela Davis called Marcus Allen. She said that the results thus far are astounding. Marcus Allen, the figures speak for themselves. The frequency of fines imposed on black defendants in his courtroom was 3 times higher than that on white defendants for identical offenses. This is widespread. How do we proceed? Marcus Allen, he inquired. We will be presenting this matter to the State Board of Judges. Additionally, Marcus Allen, this will not be forgotten by the media. Make sure you're ready. As a wave of fatigue washed over him, Marcus Allen nodded in agreement. He was unfazed by the enormity of the situation and would not back down. Word of Marcus Allen's meeting with Judge Whitman had spread widely beyond Greenville. By the conclusion of the second week, the case had garnered attention from major media outlets. Social media hashtags like Equal Justice Now and Hash Bias, as well as headlines like Systemic Bias Unveiled and Federal Prosecutor Takes a Stand, dominated the news cycle. For days the courts trended as thousands of individuals shared stories of prejudice they had encountered in the legal system. As he continued to assist the Judicial Review Commission in compiling evidence, Marcus Allen maintained his concentration. The results were catastrophic. Black defendants had their fines increased by an average of 300% compared to white defendants for the same charges during the previous 5 years, according to Judge Whitman. Judge Whitman frequently overlooked the tardiness of white defendants, while black defendants faced harsh penalties or reprimands. Minority convicts were disproportionately refused even mercy requests, such as payment arrangements. There was strong human evidence. In addition to statistical evidence, many ex-defendants spoke up, some in public and others under pseudonyms. Despite having proof that the city was incorrect, a black mother received a $500 fine for contesting a minor zoning violation. The young guy went on to explain how the judge had made fun of his work ethic and humiliated him in court, then dismissed a comparable case involving a white defendant just minutes afterward. Local activist organizations organized rallies and demanded accountability. Justice should be blind and end bias. These were the slogans of the demonstrators gathered outside the Greenville courthouse. Despite his best efforts, Marcus Allen stayed out of the limelight, but he couldn't deny the gravity of the issue. There was an increase in tension within the courtroom. People on staff who had been working with Judge Whitman for a long time started to voice their opinions. A pivotal player in the inquiry was the clerk, Mrs. Jefferson. The combination of her meticulous notes and court documents provided a thorough depiction of prejudice that extended over many years. "This is all coming out, and I can't be silent any longer," she stated during one interview with investigators. "I never imagined anybody would listen." The bailiff, Jamal Johnson Wilson, also made a public statement. "This type of torture has been going on for years," he told the commission. "It's ridiculous, and someone has to do something about it already." Simultaneously, Judge Whitman found himself increasingly isolated. He tried to brush off the claims as misunderstandings at first, but as the proof piled up, he had little choice but to play damage control. He expressed regret for any harm his unintentional actions may have caused in a rare public statement. With so much evidence pointing in the other direction, the statements were meaningless. Despite the deluge of attention, Marcus Allen maintained his composure. He kept working as a federal prosecutor, aware that his duties went beyond this case. Concurrently, he was unable to disregard the deluge of communications flooding his workplace. Supporters and those who had experienced prejudice in other courts reached out by email, phone, and letter from all across the nation. The letter from the retired Alabama attorney was really touching. "I too have been a silent witness to the injustices you've described for a long time. Your bravery in doing something most of us couldn't is much appreciated." The movement expanded beyond Greenville. As reporters and activists started poring over court documents, other South Carolina judges came under fire. A comprehensive study of municipal courts will be released by the state's Judicial Oversight Committee, which has pledged to weed out systemic prejudice. The Judicial Review Commission completed a preliminary report at the end of the month. Both the results and their consequences were scathing. There was a deeper, more systemic issue with Judge Whitman's conduct. There should be independent monitoring bodies set up, audits of judicial rulings should be conducted on a regular basis, and judges should be required to undergo bias training immediately. According to the study, Judge Whitman was overwhelmed by the demand. He announced his resignation in anticipation of a public hearing and possible disciplinary punishment. "I think it's best for this court and this community if I stand away," he stated in a brief statement. Many people had different thoughts on the news. In the eyes of some, it was an admission of guilt. In the eyes of others, it was a vital step toward recovery. It was a time of validation, not joy, for Marcus Allen. It all started with the resignation. Up next was the meat of the task. Changes began to materialize, thrusting Marcus Allen into a new position. Conferences for lawyers, community forums, and law schools invited Marcus Allen to share his story and the significance of fighting systematic racism. His narrative encouraged young attorneys, especially those from marginalized communities, to believe in their own power to make a difference. At one of these events, following Marcus Allen's address, a young black law student approached him. "You've shown me that there's more to the law than rules and regulations. People are the focus. I will fight for justice because of you." In awe of the compliment, Marcus Allen grinned. "We can improve the system if everyone pitches in, but the battle is only starting." 3 months after the morning that set everything in motion, the Greenville courtroom underwent a complete transformation. Guests were met by a freshly painted welcome desk, while the worn-out beige walls were redecorated. Numerous multilingual signs led individuals to previously unknown services, payment options, legal assistance, and step-by-step instructions. There was a small plaque beside the entryway that held significant meaning. Everyone has the right to equal justice. There were much more noticeable shifts within the courthouse. Following his resignation, Judge Whitman subtly stepped down from his position as presiding judge. His position had been filled by a younger judge who was known for being fair and unbiased. The most critical thing was that changes were already being made to the system. A new policy mandated that all court employees undergo bias training, with professionals addressing the sneaky ways in which prejudice may influence rulings. With his gaze darting about the freshly restored courtroom, Marcus Allen remained positioned in the rear. They asked him to speak to a group of local attorneys and judges about the newly implemented modification. A blend of pride and cautious hope washed over him as he patiently awaited his turn. A new chapter had begun, but he was well aware that much work remained. Changes weren't limited to Greenville. Other South Carolina towns and eventually the nation as a whole followed Marcus Allen's lead and started reassessing their own judicial systems. With a focus on racial and socioeconomic inequalities, state judicial review bodies instituted mandated audits of case outcomes. Oversight committees were formed to monitor court processes and ensure accountability. These committees included attorneys, community organizers, and even some previous defendants. You could feel the energy building in Marcus Allen's office. Framed on his wall today, his find from that fateful morning served as a constant reminder of the reason he had stood up, rather than a prize. Pictured below was a recent gathering of his fellow law students who had established a civil rights clinic in his memory. Marcus Allen felt an overwhelming feeling of duty for these young people because their grins expressed optimism for the future of the legal profession. Equally noteworthy were the reverberations inside the community. Judge Whitman's former seasoned bailiff, Jamal Johnson Wilson, was now teaching court officials how to avoid bias. He spoke to a group of recently hired employees during one of his seminars. Keeping order isn't our only responsibility, he insisted. The purpose of this is to guarantee that every individual entering this space is treated with respect. One should speak up when they perceive wrongdoing. Quietness betrays collaboration. A new program emphasizing ethical court standards was to be overseen by Mrs. Jefferson, the court clerk, whose records had played a crucial role in the inquiry. She dedicated herself fully to her job, providing guidance to less experienced clerks and ensuring that history would not repeat itself. The impact of Marcus Allen went well beyond the realm of law. At a neighboring law school, he started a class on judicial ethics and civil rights. Many of his pupils lingered after class to seek his advice on how they, too, might have a positive impact on the world. A student came to him one afternoon with a notepad brimming with reform proposals. To make the system more equitable, she wanted to know what people's top priorities were. Marcus Allen paused to consider his answer. Pay heed, with one another, with the clients of our courts, and with those who are frightened to speak up. Change starts with listening. Some people resisted the reforms. There was pushback from certain judges and lawyers who felt the additional checks and balances diminished their power. However, the proof was incontestable. The statistics demonstrated a notable decline in racial inequalities in Greenville's municipal court sentencing and penalties within 1 year. Greater payment arrangements were authorized, and offenders felt handled with greater respect, according to reports. The most fulfilling experiences for Marcus Allen were when individuals came up to him to tell their tales. Months later, he went back to the courts to thank him on behalf of an old black man who had been there that morning. In an emotionally charged statement, the guy remarked, "I've been coming here for 40 years. I never imagined the day would come when someone finally said, 'Enough of the injustice they've witnessed. Your words have restored our faith.'" A letter arrived at Marcus Allen's office one morning. His tale inspired a young Chicago public defender to uncover prejudice in her own court system. At its conclusion, the letter had a single, impactful sentence: "Your stance brought back the original motivation for my legal career." After giving the letter a second reading, Marcus Allen filed it away in the impact folder. He reclined in his chair, allowing the gravity of the situation to sink in. He was unimportant. That was never the case. Many people's voices had been disregarded or hushed for far too long, and this was about them. Finally, we were acknowledging their voices. Marcus Allen returned to the courtroom where it all started months later. There was no case or inquiry that brought him there, A new center for judicial ethics, partially named after him, asked him to deliver a speech at its inauguration. He glanced out at the audience as he approached the podium. With expressions ranging from excitement to appreciation, the room was filled with judges, attorneys, clerks, and members of the community. Justice encompasses more than simply following the letter of the law, Marcus Allen said. The core of the issue is how we treat those who come to our courts. Things like respect, dignity, and equity are at stake, and it's about making sure that everyone, regardless of identity, knows how much they are valued. Even though the crowd was roaring with appreciation, Marcus Allen couldn't take his eyes off the faces in there. Even while there was still a long way to go, he saw optimism, resolve, and the seeds of genuine change, and he recognized it was progress.